Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad 3 and see how this particular iPad holds up in 2025. Now, for a lot of people out there, I probably would not really recommend buying, this type of iPad anymore. I think there are far better options out there for the everyday average person that we'll go and take a look at throughout this whole entire video. But if you are about to go through and pick up a device, luckily for you, I think there's a lot more types of iPads that are, I would probably recommend buying for the most part. So if you want to go and pick up some of those particular iPads, links of those will be down in the description below. You can get that from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of this particular iPad. This iPad originally came out back in 2012. So this was the third generation iPad that Apple has ever made. And if you think back to it, that was actually a very incredible thing that Apple ended up even kind of doing, right? Because they released these iPads kind of like very soonish, kind of against each other. But that also was a very nice thing too, because they were able to iterate pretty quickly between them. So that was always something that I loved seeing. With something like the iPad 3rd generation, this iPad on the front is giving you a 9.7-inch IPS LCD panel. The thing I can tell you about this panel on the front is that it is kind of like it was really good panel when it first came out. Nowadays, it might not be quite the best panel of all time, but it still is like a really decent type of panel for the most part. With the iPad 3rd generation, you're getting like this very high resolution panel, which is kind of interesting. And it still is giving you a bunch of bezel around it. Like when you look at this iPad, there's going to be a lot of bezel around this thing that you could probably if you can believe it or not. But here's the thing, right? This is an older styling of iPad. This is an older device. So it makes a lot of sense that this type of iPad looks the way that it does, because if you're going to go through and pick up an iPad like this, you're probably going to experience that, this is an older iPad, it's 13 years old, so it's going to look like a 13-year-old iPad. If you're trying to get an iPad that's supposed to be like, better, more, it's going to be like looking better for a longer period of time, then you're going to have to kind of look elsewhere, because this iPad is not really going to be the one for you. But it's a 13-year-old iPad. On the sides of this iPad, it still feels and looks actually pretty good for the most part. There's not really that much to really complain about there. I think it still actually feels like a pretty expensive iPad. Like this thing definitely does give me the impression that it does kind of, stand up fairly well against some of the competition. So that's always something that's pretty nice going on with these types of iPads as well. On top of that though, you're also going to see that this type of iPad is still using that old 30-pin connector on the bottom. That's always something that's kind of interesting, because if you're about to go through and pick up a device, you're going to kind of see and experience that these types of iPads are going to be giving you these types of kind of a little bit of a different types of experiences. So that right there is always going to be something to keep in mind, because, this type of iPad is giving you a little bit of an older type of layout. So that right there is going to be another really important thing to keep in mind there from that particular side as well. You're still getting the home button on the front. You're getting this, flat side all throughout, well, at least on the back side. Well, it's not even flat, it's like kind of curved. But I would still probably say these types of iPads actually still look and feel pretty good against each other, right? They're very premium type of devices. They are supposed to give you lots of good capability and stuff. And that was always something that was really nice about these types of iPads. I always appreciated that about them. But here's the thing, right? If you're about to go through and pick up some of these types of iPads, these things are already kind of past their prime, so to speak. They're much older type of iPads, as you can imagine. They're definitely going to feel and perform like much older iPads. So that's kind of the big thing here, right? It's like, why would you want to go ahead and buy an iPad like this if you can go through and maybe pick up a different device that's going to give you a way better experience? Because with this type of device, I do think there are way better options out there for you to go ahead and buy rather than this one. So that's kind of the way I see it. I thought it was a good improvement coming from the first couple generation of iPads, but nowadays this one really doesn't make much sense at all to buy. So that right there is kind of one of those other things to keep in mind there too. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now, on top of that, another important thing to keep in mind here too is the fact that between these types of devices, like with the iPhone, with the iPad 3rd generation, this thing was giving you that camera setup. So you were basically getting a 5 megapixel camera on the backside, and then you were getting a VGA camera on the front side. So that right there is also another really important thing to keep in mind here as well. Because if you're about to go through and use one of these types of devices, you're basically going to see that these types of devices and these types of, cameras aren't actually too bad. And that is actually something that's really nice to be able to do, because you're able to go through and like pick up a device like this and still you're able to get like a decent type of layout inside of it. So that is always something nice to basically have. Like if you're able to go through and like pick up an iPad like this, at least it has a camera, right? But at the same time, it genuinely doesn't make any sense at all to go and buy an iPad like this even if this thing does have a camera, because there are far better options out there for you to go ahead and buy rather than these types of devices. They're really not that good anymore. It was good kind of when it first came out, but if you have like an iPhone 4S type of camera, that camera will probably end up giving you a better experience than this one. So that right there is another really important thing to keep in mind. I would hate for you to go through and pick up one of these types of devices if they're already going to be kind of outdated. And that's essentially what's going to end up happening here if you go through and buy one of these types of devices. So from that side too, that is, it's just one of those big things to keep in mind. And that's kind of what you're going to end up experiencing if you end up getting one of these types of devices. So from that side as well, that kind of covers it up there too. Now, on top of that, another important thing to keep in mind here as well is the fact that between both, like the iPad 3rd generation is not getting any more software updates. So you're just going to have to kind of keep that in mind. These iPads are basically done getting software. So what would even be the point of picking up an iPad like this, right? There are substantially way better options out there for the everyday average person. And it really just doesn't make a lot of sense to go through and buy any of these types of iPads anymore, right? They're already done getting software updates. They're already outdated. And because of that, I do think there are way better options out there for you than to pick up these types of iPads. That's just kind of the way I see it. And if you're in the market and you're about to go through and pick up some of these types of devices, like I said before, I do think it makes a lot more sense to go and maybe pick up some other iPads rather than these ones. I also would probably say that when it kind of comes down to like the performance, this iPad is giving you the Apple A5X chip inside with 1GB of RAM. That really isn't that much RAM to have inside of a device, and that kind of is like a pretty outdated type of device to basically have from that particular standpoint as well. Like this thing is going to be giving you pretty much like a fairly outdated type of experience when it comes down to that side. I mean, 1GB of RAM is really not that much anymore when you have iPads with like 12 or 16GB of RAM. So you're getting a very, very low amount of RAM inside of this device. And that right there, that is going to be kind of a big problem that you might be running into from that side, because you might be wanting a device that's giving you a better experience. And unfortunately, this type of device just really isn't going to be giving you that. So that right there could be one big takeaway as well. It's like, well, why would you want to go ahead and buy one of these types of devices if they're just already going to be kind of outdated? So that's just one of those things to keep in mind here. Again, I would hate for you to go through and pick up one of these types of phones if they're already outdated from that particular standpoint. So kind of keep that in mind. It's not really the biggest deal in the world, but it could be another one of those types of situations that you might run into here as well. So overall, what I'll probably tell you is that it really doesn't make any sense at all to go ahead and buy one of these types of, iPads anymore, right? I think there are way better options out there than these ones. It makes a lot more sense to go through and buy some of these other iPads that have came out that are still pretty much worth buying. Things like the iPad, M1 model, the iPad Air M1. There's a lot of other iPads out there too that make a lot more sense to go and pick up. It really just doesn't make a lot of sense to go and buy these types of iPads anymore when there are basically far better options out there. So in my personal opinion, that right there is another one of those really important things to keep in mind here, right? It's like, why pick up an iPad like this when there's way better options? So in my personal opinion, that kind of covers it up there as well. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.